But overall, it's a beautiful industry, and there are beautiful people working in it. And for me, academics was not my thing, and for me, I really found a home in this business and in this industry, and I think that is true for many of us.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. COVID was a time of reflection, of adversity, and also a moment of opportunity. The rules were thrown out the window, and if positive came from all of it, it was the ability to break the shackles of the past, of perception, and of self-restraint. What has emerged in the new dawn of hospitality? Daniel Humm is the chef and owner of Make It Nice, a New York-based hospitality group behind 11 Madison Park and 11 Madison Home. Daniel, how are you?
I'm really good. So nice to be on this call with you.
It's great to get you on the show, and it's great to have you in Australia. What brings you down here?
Well, we're here to do a 2-week pop-up at Aria Restaurant in Sydney, and it's just such a great pleasure to be back in the city. As you know, I have such positive memories because in 2017, that was the first time I was in Sydney, and then Melbourne was when our restaurant was named the number 1 restaurant in the world. So this is my first time back.
Well, that was quite an extraordinary moment. Take us back to that moment. What did it feel like for you?
It's kind of a double-edged sword. I have to say, of course, it was like a goal that we have tried to reach for so long. And when I was young, I was a competitive cyclist, and then I had a bad accident, and then I sort of decided to become a chef, and I took an athlete's mentality towards this profession, and winning was really important to me. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to win every award there was, and it was from the Michelin stars to the New York Times stars to the Saget ratings, and then in the end, it was this race to become the best restaurant in the world. And I understood that all of these things were all of these wins. I mean, there's no best restaurant in the world. It's kind of a silly thing to think that, but it's sort of this carrot that's in front of you and the team, and it's a way to motivate, and it gives you sort of a North Star that is very powerful, and it does make the restaurant better, and you have these wins along the way that give you wind in the back. But the moment we were in Sydney, in Melbourne actually, the moment we were in Melbourne to reach this award, it already kind of started feeling disorienting, because already that night in the press conference, we had 30 people asking us, what's next? And you're not quite prepared for this. You don't have the answer. And that's also frustrating, because you actually don't have the answer. You don't know what's next and what is the North Star now. And so as amazing as it feels to reach the mountaintop, it also was quite disorienting and scary, to be fully transparent.
Well, after that moment as well, you completely changed 11 Madison Park after all of that success. Tell us about what drove that change and sort of what you did.
So it's really the pandemic happened, and that was devastating for our industry overall. We lost most of our team because people come from all over the world to work with us. So people's visas expired and everyone sort of vanished. And I decided to turn the restaurant. We were close to 2 years. And I decided to turn the restaurant into a community kitchen. And we just started cooking meals for people in need. we cooked about 8,000 meals every day, and over 1 million meals in the course of the pandemic. And it changed my life, and I started to feel so much more connected to the language of food and the power it has to create change. I started to feel much more connected with New York City because we cooked the meals, but we also went out into these neighborhoods and we met these amazing people. Everywhere there's amazing people who don't have much and are willing to give everything. So it really felt like this sense of responsibility that we sort of have to give back. And during the pandemic, we were facing bankruptcy. We didn't know if the restaurant will ever open again. And I sort of started to become okay with it during the pandemic because I felt that as a fine dining chef and as a fine dining restaurant, we reached everything I wanted to reach and more. And so maybe this was a sign that now my efforts should go to make the world sort of a better place to give back. But then a few months into the pandemic, our landlord came to me and they said, this city really needs this restaurant and this building needs you, and we will forgive you all the rent that you owe, and we will help you reopen the restaurant. And so then when I put my creative hat back on, I realized that I had changed. And I realized that I had no interest in opening the same restaurant again. And I felt responsible to use this platform, our creativity, our language of food towards change. And that's sort of when we sort of decided that we would open the restaurant as a fully plant-based restaurant post-pandemic.
It's truly extraordinary change within yourself, but also professionally with what you're offering. What were the challenges and sort of the insights that you got as you started to explore the plant-based world for the restaurant?
Yeah, I mean, there were so many. I mean, there was, and we're still also in it. I mean, it's sort of when you're stepping into this new place where fine dining restaurants haven't really been to. There is also, there is fear. There is some, people from the industry who don't quite know how to, react to this. It's almost like, I don't know, when you stop drinking and you sort of go to a friend's dinner and everyone is having a good time and everyone is drinking and you're like, oh, I'm not drinking tonight. And then they're like, what? Like, what's wrong with you? Do you think you're better than us, or are you judging us? Or like, no, I just don't want to drink tonight. It's not that big of a deal. And honestly, it's kind of feeling in this way. People feel like, oh my God, are they thinking they're better than us, or are they judging us? And it's nothing like that. We just feel like we have this incredible platform, and we have the luxury of using. We are selling an experience much more than just food. So we can use our creativity to show a different, to tell a different story that just happens not to be with meat and fish anymore. Yeah. I mean, it's been so beautiful, Anthony. Like, of course, and my team as well, in the beginning, were kind of, scared of like leaving some of these things behind that we we're quite good with, like that we perfected, like our duck, our lobster, the way we cook them. I mean, we perfected that for 30 years. And in the beginning, it felt like, wow, maybe this new path will be sort of limiting. But the truth is, it's been the opposite. This has been so liberating and so beautiful. And when I look back now, I feel like we were limited before. Because before, in a way, when you think about, it's pretty given what a meal in a fine dining restaurant is going to be. There's going to be maybe some vegetables in the beginning, then maybe some raw fish, and then maybe some cooked fish, and then maybe some shellfish, and then maybe a little bit of poultry, and then maybe a beef dish, and then there's going to be desserts. It's quite given. And so, in a way, I almost feel like in the past, we almost cooked seasonal condiments to the proteins. And today, we are completely free. And there are 100 options what a main course could be. And even more so, we're also much more looking at different cuisines from around the world, because there are cuisines that have a deep history in plant-based cooking, like Indian cuisine, like Shojin cuisine, like the Zen Buddhist cuisine. There are parts of China where there's a lot of vegetable cooking. I mean, so we're everything has opened up. Everything has been getting more diverse and more open and more free, and it's been really beautiful.
You mentioned about, there isn't really a number one restaurant in the world, but those sort of those goals are so important. You became the first, the only vegan restaurant in the history of the Michelin Guide to receive 3 stars. How did that feel compared to all of the other accolades that you've had, given the change that you've had?
In the beginning, when we set out on this journey, I even called Michelin. I said, look, like, I'm so grateful for all the support over the years, and I'm going on this new journey, and I don't know what that means to our relationship, but I understand that might be a change. And I sort of I'm looking at it almost like today we're climbing a second mountain. We have the privilege to climb a new mountain. The first mountain was sort of the mountain of accolades, and sort of it was a lot also about serving our own egos. Like, we all have that, and we all need to serve it to a degree. And today on the second mountain, it's really bigger than that. It's bigger than awards. And when we set out, I understood that we might never get a Michelin star again, and we might never, all these rankings, because this is a new world. But looking back and how it's unfolded, I have recognized that some of these accolades, even today, are really important. And it's sort of, in terms of accolades, I think it's sort of been a little bit of a mixed bag, and we've been also heavily criticized. And, certain critics, I don't think they quite know what to do with this experience. And naturally, they try to take it apart. And then, last fall, when we did receive that call, and they told us that, I mean, they literally said that 11 Madison Park is the new North Star for any young chef who is setting out on this new career, and this is the new standard for 3 stars. I mean, I was quite emotional, and it felt really, really, really special, because it's something that it was unthinkable that could happen.
I want to explore this a little bit more in a moment, but But you grew up in Switzerland. Take us back to when you were young. What sort of role did food play in your family growing up?
Yeah. I was lucky that I grew up in a middle class family, but my mom was a great cook, and she paid attention where the ingredients sort of were coming from. So, we didn't eat meat more than once a week, but when we ate it, we always knew from where it was from, and the same with the vegetables. She would go to the nearby farms and buys them, and so even without knowing, I sort of started to have, I guess, a little bit of a taste for real, fresh, and wholesome ingredients. But I was, I really, as a kid, I wanted to be a professional cyclist. So I wasn't like, I wasn't the kid who was like baking and cooking at home. Not at all. And then even at 14 years old, I actually dropped out of school to pursue cycling professionally. And and I had a sort of a challenging relationship with, especially with my father, who was not supporting of this at all. And he sort of said, fine, you can do this, but you're on your own, basically. And so and I needed to make some money. So at 14, 15 years old, the only place that I could find work at was in kitchens. And so it was more like just a job to get a paycheck. And I did this for years, slowly falling more and more in love with it, to the point where then when I was like 22 years old and I had a bad accident, that really made me question the future in cycling. That then I was thinking, wow, I have this love for cooking and I should maybe make this my career. And that's sort of like how it almost kind of fell in my lap in sort of a beautiful way.
What were the really sort of key moments for you in hospitality early on in your career and the key people that sort of helped guide you on your path?
When I was 18 years old, I was still cycling, and our team was invited to have a meal at a restaurant. It was called Freddy Girardet, who was one of the great chefs in Switzerland and in sort of Nouvelle Cuisine movement. And he was a big cycling enthusiast, and he invited our team to eat at the table in the kitchen. And it was mesmerizing. Just sitting there and seeing 25 chefs in, pressed white uniforms with toques, and there was not a spot in the kitchen, and it was harmonious, and it felt competitive. It felt like teamwork and team sport almost. Um, and for me, that moment, I something clicked, and I sort of started to see cooking in a different way, as sort of a team sport, and that could be great heights that could be achieved. So that was like a little bit of a moment for me. And then I ended up working there after my accident, and he was a great mentor. And then, one of the key moments was when I was 25 years old. Well, maybe before, when I was 24 years old and after working with Girardet for 2 years, then I became the chef of this small, like, little restaurant with like 30 seats outside of Zurich, this very idyllic, beautiful town overlooking the mountains and the lakes. And I received the Michelin star when I was 24 years old. Kind of out of nowhere, and I wasn't prepared for it at all, not ready for it. I had no repertoire of dishes. I didn't know who I was as a chef, and that was quite stressful because all of a sudden people came out from everywhere and sort of started judging what I was doing, um, you know. And then 2 years later, I got this phone call from San Francisco, from a Swiss person who was running a hotel and was looking for a chef. And he just called me up and said, "Hey, I'm looking for a chef, and I heard great things, and I would love to hire you." And I was like, "Oh my!" I was like, "Wow, San Francisco? I'm not so sure. I've never been to America. I don't know." He invited me, and for like a 2 week, looking at everything, and I just fell so in love with it. And then I moved when I was 26 on a student visa with 2 suitcases to San Francisco, and that was sort of, I mean, that's a pivotal moment where my life completely took a turn in a new direction.
What what were the challenges for you, and how different was working in kitchens in America compared to what you were used to?
Um, well, on one side, it was sort of this excitement for fine dining in a way that in Europe people almost were a little bit jaded of. In America, it was just about to start. Like the French Laundry started to become like a real thing there. They were, the farmers markets. There was this excitement. There were starting to make a lot more cheese, and they became more refined on how they made their cheese and their charcuterie and all the. It was like a real sort of boom on all of these things that in Europe were, people almost were just so used to them that there wasn't that much excitement about. So that was one. There was this euphoria about cooking and ingredients. And then on the other side, there was also sort of like this freeness that came because people weren't classically trained. So in Europe, certain things you couldn't do because they were going against the rules. Well, in the US, those rules weren't yet established. So for me, coming to the US, having had that classical training, but now having also sort of that freedom to break loose without being criticized for it, was extremely freeing. And I mean, it maybe it went both ways. There was this freedom, but then at times you wished that there were maybe some more cooks who were a little bit more classical trained. But you know so yeah, but it was overall, it was such a positive experience. And I mean, that was just a key moment for me, that I took that leap of faith and risk, if you would, to just kind of come to this new country. And then in San Francisco, everything happened so quickly for me as well. I ended up being there only just for 2 years, and I was named Rising Star Chef after only being a few years in the country by the James Beard Foundation, which was actually the first time I went to New York to receive the awards. And then I saw New York for the first time, and I felt this special feeling about the city and the energy. And I knew that that was sort of like the stage I eventually want to end up on. But then I worked in San Francisco for 2 years, and we got, a lot of great accolades. And in the end, we got 4 stars by the San Francisco Chronicle, and they called me the brightest star to arrive in California since Thomas Keller. And then Danny Meyer came to have a meal, and he was obviously the famous restaurateur from New York. And he said, I have this restaurant, 11 Madison Park, and I'm looking for a chef, and I want to make it into one of the great restaurants in the world. And at first I was skeptical because I've heard that many times. A lot of people want to do that, but very few people know actually what it will take. But then Danny ended up being just a great partner and supporter, and knew what it would take. And I moved to New York in 2005, almost 20 years ago, and started on that journey to build this amazing restaurant.
How did you end up as owner of 11 Madison Park? Tell us the story behind that.
Yeah. Will and I had a partner in the dining room. A year into it, I realized that I needed to have a partner who is running the dining room, and that's how I met Will Guidera, who I know has been on your show as well, and he was working for Danny Meyer at that time, and we just kind of clicked, and we were both ambitious, and we shared a vision, and we started working together as employees at the restaurant for a few years, and then at some point we sort of like started thinking about how long are we going to be here. Do we want to open our own restaurant eventually, and then at some point we had a conversation with Danny, and he sort of mentioned that maybe we should buy the restaurant, and that's how it sort of happened. We then were able to find an investor and take a loan, and in 2011 buy the restaurant, and having our own business, which was a dream come true.
Did it change your approach to the business and your cooking once you owned it yourself?
And it's I almost sometimes feel like scared to say this because it didn't. And I know, because I feel like maybe it should have, or even now, after all these years, I don't think about it too much, which I guess is a good thing, to not feeling this pressure. But I just feel like I'm a part of this entire group who is doing this work on a daily basis. And I don't feel like, and I guess I've always had this ownership about the work, and I hold myself to a very high standard, and everyone around, and but people also, they hold also themselves. I like to surround myself with people, like-minded people, who hold themselves to this kind of standard, and all have like this sense of ownership. But I think the first time it really hit was when the pandemic happened, because then it was truly all on my shoulders, and we didn't know how to pay the bills because there was no business. Like for 2 years, there was zero business, and so that was sort of the only time where it really sunk in that I'm the owner.
The world has changed somewhat, and certainly your approach has changed as a result of the pandemic and everything that's happened in the last few years. For chefs sort of entering the industry or just getting their careers started, what sort of advice do you have for this new sort of dawn of hospitality that we're in?
Well, number one, I want to say it's just one of the most beautiful business to be in. And I feel that our industry has gotten so much criticism, over hard work environments and tough work conditions and all these things and long hours, whatever. And, some of that is true, and I'm sure there is some bad examples. But overall, it's a beautiful industry, and there are beautiful people working in it. And for me, like, academics was not my thing. And for me, I really found a home in this business and in this industry. And I think that is true for many of us. And, yeah, and you get to express yourself. You get to work with your hands. I just really, I really think it's such a beautiful business to be in. And then in terms of advice, you know, in any business, you kind of have to put in something to get something out of it. And in this business, I think it's quite direct. I feel like you get out what you put in. Um, but yeah, it's not always easy, nor is any other job if you want to, have a successful career. Um, I think what I was lucky was that when I started out, in a way, maybe there were not as many options available to people. And so when I'm in New York now, or in a city like Sydney, where it's so multicultural and there's an abundance of opportunities, like in the cooking world as a young chef, it can be quite difficult because maybe one day you want to learn how to make bread, and then the next day you get inspired by how people make pizza, and then you want to learn about Japanese food, and then you want to learn about traditional French cooking, and then you want to, yeah, there's just so many different opportunities. And one advice I would say, it's like, you cannot become a master of all these things, as exciting as it is. I really feel like you have to sort of pick your sort of specialty and try to go really deep with that. That would be my advice. Try not to get too distracted by this amazing world that we get to live in.
That's amazing advice. You, as you mentioned at the top of the show, you're in Sydney at the moment. What's your thoughts about the produce that you've had access to while cooking here?
Oh, it's been. I want to give a shout out to Matt Moran and his team here at Aria Restaurant, who have been just so supportive and have made us feel like home here. And leading up to this event, they have been such a great resource on finding, the best ingredients, and we were really able to tap into their network, and they have helped us securing us these incredible ingredients. But it's a beautiful country with such diversity of ingredients, and yeah, it's been truly wonderful, and we've I mean, right now we have this citrus dish, and just the variety of citrus is just unbelievable, and it tastes like nothing else I've ever tasted before. And we created a dish for Sydney with avocado and tamburi, which is this tamburi is these kochia seeds that are harvested. We actually get it from Japan, from when we worked with these Zen Buddhists. One of the Zen Buddhists, his family grows this kochia seeds, and they're harvested by hand. We use mostly local ingredients, but that's one ingredient that we sort of like use that's not local, because we have such a kind of connection to it now. But we created this dish with avocado, and I mean, the avocados that you have here, it's unbelievable. And we have a dish with all these different kinds of seaweeds, and really, I mean, exceptional. Yeah, this you live in a exceptional, beautiful part of the world. It's mesmerizing.
We tend to agree. You've had the most extraordinary impact on so many people across the globe with your career and its sharing of food. What do you love about what you do?
Well, my whole life I've been really inspired by art, and a lot of my friends are painters and artists, and I've studied art history, and I always been fascinated by the artists who sort of stepped into a new space, like the first time abstract painting was happening. It's only about 100 years ago that took place, and there were a few artists. They were sort of like trying to be the first to be in that space. They even backdated some of the paintings to like show that to win this race, you know. But that's sort of fascinating to me. Or you know, there's an artist called Lucio Fontana who basically just took a canvas and he took a knife and he cut through it and sort of questioning what painting is, and sort of created a whole new way of looking at something. And today, and as a chef or in my own profession, I never thought that would be an opportunity for me to once step into sort of a space where people, or in the fine dining world where restaurants haven't really gone on to. And today, and it was during the pandemic that all of a sudden, when the city was shut down and it felt like I had nothing to lose, all of a sudden I felt this really powerful feeling that I might have the opportunity to step into this open space where not many have stepped onto it. And sort of like, for me to be at this stage in my career and to be as excited creatively as I've ever been before, I'm just so beyond grateful for this journey. I feel like I'm at the very beginning, and I feel like we have now found sort of a bigger purpose than just reaching, you know, rankings and Michelin stars.
Well, Daniel, it's an absolute honour to have you on Deep in the Weeds today, to hear just a part of your story. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
I really appreciate it, Anthony. Thank you for having me.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.